At some point, I think I have to do this more in a dialogue with others, but not at this point. I think I have to establish a more a context that can be useful in dialogue with others. I'm not saying that I'm not with others in different contexts, but would be nice to have a more dialogical approach to this. So it's not only me talking. I want to also emphasize that I'm mostly listening to people who's above my pay grade, so to speak, and getting more and more inspired by what they do and how they do it. And there's something I also want to explore. I have some words written down, and I'm gonna see if I can make sense out of it. It's not or make it coherent in a way, I guess. Uh, and in order to do that, I have to take my time, try to stay as grounded as possible. And I think maybe I'll share some first before. I guess maybe not. It's hard to say sometimes what to share and not to share. I think the headline is um, maybe I'm not gonna set the headline. I had something written down. It says reconstruction of the past in the present for a vivid future. And I think I want to start with maybe what I think I get, at least at the propositional level. No, also experientially. the left and the right hemisphere that Ian McGilchrist has really highlighted in his books. And basically the idea is that the left is logical and argumentative, or maybe that's not the right word. Like it thrives in constraints and details. And the right hemisphere is basically the opposite, that it thrives in wholeness and a broader, deeper experience and ideas. I think that's roughly very overly simplified, but just to get the idea. It's also said that the right hemisphere is supposed to be the center of sacredness, and the left is what the whole Western civilization is culturally built up built up built up from. That's my main argument of the book, that we have left the sacred because the left hemisphere is kind of more effective, detail oriented, and all the things that come out of that, like institutions, government, economy, everything that's efficient and makes stuff work, I guess you can say, to a certain extent. To a certain extent. Um, Now I'm wondering why I put this into this list of words. And how to connect it to the other things here. Maybe it's fair to try, or maybe I'm gonna try to I think maybe it's just good to have that frame of reference, maybe. The distinction between the left and right. Just have it like in the background. Maybe it will reveal something at a certain point of this exploration. So the next thing I have in my list of words is the inner and outer context. And to make more meaning out of what I mean with this is So we have our own inner system that's more or less organized. So our inner environment or our inner context is always at play, so to speak. It's always doing stuff. Every nanosecond is because we're alive. We and we can it's always running at at the level. And then we have the outer context, our environment that's also always doing stuff. That's that we can participate in, or maybe it's better to say like we're at the primordial level, like in our more unconscious places. We're always participating in the context in the environment. And the and, like it says inner and outer context, and if we're always at some level participating in the outer context, that makes the and a connection point to the inner and the outer context. And the and maybe it's better to say the andness is where the connection to anything happens. And I also want to make the distinction between the horizontal level, and that's what I'm speaking to now, me relating to the outer context, whatever that is. And so the relational space, so to speak, I'm always in relationship to something. It can be a white wall, looking at the wall. I have a relationship to that wall. Sounds weird, but just gonna just to emphasize that we're always in the relationship to something, what we can perceive, and if like it's quite obvious that what's going on in our inner context is always informed by our outer context. So if suddenly the chair I'm sitting in would disappear, I would fall to the ground. So it's nothing mysterious about this at all. Um, yeah, I was starting to go move towards the end, the endness, as I called it. What is the endness? And how do the inner and the outer context connect? Very well-worn, used metaphor is when I breathe, um, I take in air. So air is the end in the inner and the outer. I breathe air, and that connects me to the outer and the inner, or the, yeah. And maybe I'll move on and try to connect this, or it's fair, maybe it's fair to say that maybe I want to go in another direction. It's the and is also a letter, obviously, and the letter and, or the word, those three letters is also yeah, a word. So that gives us a way of uh, this one word that's very useful in our language. Um, and we have in this more mythopoetic way is it can do like it can, I think it's fair to say that a mythopoetic language is useful in very many ways, or in many ways, because makes it invokes our imagination, or the enactment of our imagination, so we can have a different relationship to how we frame things. If I frame it like take of like trying to think of an example. If I frame it like let's see here. If I frame my feeling or experience as angry, it it can do, it has a certain, usually negative connotation. But if I frame it as power, that's also can have a negative conversation, no connotation. But it can also point to. So I guess I'm trying to say that the flavor of or the how we frame our experience is important so we can come into a more I want to say rational uh, relationship to ourselves and to others and to the world. So that's very. I hope that's clear. That if I call something bad, like that's bad. That's more like, of course, things can be bad, but it's also maybe it's bad for me, or maybe it's good for others, and that's why we have sovereignty in how the world shows up for us. That is actually not maybe to say it's not my opinion. That's not, I don't think that's an opinion. It's just how the impact is for me. And that it's hard to argue about somebody else's how they perceive reality. That's that's not up to us human to say or argue with. Um, but it's also in our attempt to frame things. So I'm gonna go back to the mythopoetic point I was trying to make. Like, if I call a river disgusting, I might not go into it. But if I frame it as, oh, this is lovely, I'm more inclined, of course, to swim in the water or step into the river. And if we're gonna use language to shape our experience, that's possible. It is always going on some level. We cannot not interpret our world. We can be more or less conscious of how we interpret the world, but yeah, it's like I said, it's always going on. It can go on in like verbally, like I'm doing right now. I'm speaking and interpreting things and trying to talk about stuff that I'm interested in. And So if we step into the verbal water, it's good to have some flexibility and different way of using words and not being totally fixed in that in our own words, but of course we have our biases. It's not possible to step out of that. It can be changed in conversations with others, and we can do different things to uncover our blind spots. But there's also another level to this. If I and I want to say what I written there. It's like also if we it's useful to say like there's a verbal water and there's a non-verbal river that's running all the time. Maybe I can say that our stream of consciousness is more or less a non-verbal river. But the river is also can be very rapid and overflowing and drive the current in different directions that we might not intended when we stepped into it. And suddenly you're by the waterfall and it's too late to turn back because the current is too strong. And that brings me back, I think, to the inner and the outer context. Maybe I'll circle back to that. Because if my nonverbal inner river, that's my inner context, is very rapid and overflowing and has a lot of twisting and turnings, and it makes it more difficult to be aware of the outer context. And in a relational framing or context, it's very useful to be aware that there is also an inner context in the outer context that's in front of me. But if I'm too caught up in my own inner river, it's hard to also to verbalize the water because it's always running, and so when we lose our awareness about the inner context of the outer context, that that can create a a certain disruption in the relationship with what we're relating to. Like I was saying, if suddenly this chair disappears, I will fall into the ground, and that might hurt. It's also fair to say in what I'm trying to talk about is this is a very, given the water that we find ourselves in, and the, if it's water like still water or is a non-verbal or verbal river that's always going on, more or less not more or less, but or maybe more or less consciously. It's fair to say that it's high. We're in a highly dynamic. We always find ourselves in a highly dynamic system, and it's super, super complex, and we can never get to anywhere near to understand what we're really like. Is if we think we are ever gonna get to the full explanation of reality, I think that's highly arrogant and ignorant and yeah, other words. That's not very. That's very harsh, but our left hemisphere tend to believe that this is what's going on, and this is my story about it, and that's it. That's reality. And of course, it's very helpful to have some distance to what our mind makes up reality to be, and have some more humility to 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 others and to the world and to ourselves also. It's not it's not given that we're right about what our left hemisphere has decided something to be. It's useful to have some balance in the betweenness of the left and the right hemispheres. To have to have that famous reality check. Or to approach a more real reality, so to speak. And I think that moves me to, I'm not sure if this is coherent, but trying. Mm, is in that context of what I've been saying, trying to talk about the inner river and like the innerness of the outer river or water is not given. It's never not. It's never ever given that is rivers and waters has in order for it to be a water or a lake or a river, it has to be also constraints, or else it wouldn't be a river or a water or a lake. But if our, how to say this, if our if our if we forget that we're actually not explicit, I'm messing this up. It's not given that the current that we find ourselves in um, this is a hard exercise because I'm trying to use a symbol or the metaphor of water in combination with what I'm trying to talk about. So I'm trying to hold two things. I guess I can say that I'm trying to be the water with the current of a river right now. So if I'm gonna get to like it's maybe when I'm in the river, it's not given that I can see the water that's at the end of the river or the lake. because I'm in it and it's chaotic and it's it has taken a hold on me, and the current is too strong to turn back and to swim against. I don't have the energy to do that. So I have to, or at some point, I have to surrender to the river's forces and hope that I won't be dropped in a steep waterfall and be crushed before I get to the ocean. And but maybe this is sufficient enough. Con like maybe this is the farthest I can get for now in this exploration. Talking about all these things and the kind of giving meaning to a reconstruction. Um, my last point is, given all the above, what I'm trying to make sense of. Maybe one more thing before I get to the ocean. Maybe more. W- Given the fact that we're all interconnected, that's my quite recent, maybe not recent, but I guess more conscious take on reality. Um, Given that it creates it creates maybe to say it demands it's a very strong word, but I want to use it. It demands a certain level of awareness when we're stepping into currents that can lead us, um, break us in a high enough waterfall, or it can guide us into a more calm and quiet, restful ocean or lake. But having said all this for a while now, it's up to each and every one of us if we want to take that risk, given the waterfall, to choose if we want to step into the river and give our consent to whatever the river demands of our energy and all the obstacles that we can um, hit along the way or break. It's up to each and every one of us if we want to step into that river or not. And as I was saying, give our consent to somebody else's inner current that is not um, that's overflowing and it's very good to be aware of that, what we're consenting or committing ourselves to when our awareness isn't isn't attuned enough to what's actually going on in that current. Very serious stuff. I wasn't, yeah, I guess I'm being serious. Um, Sometimes that's that's really helpful, but that took it took a lot of effort to try to expand on. But It's also interesting to, as an exercise, to try to hold several things, like ideas, and using the poetic, metaphorical language to see to kind of gather ideas into that might be more vivid and less technical and less instrumental. Uh, It's it's hard because, yeah, given the water that we're brought up in, I'm talking culturally about our materialistic scientific worldview. It's a very pragmatic way to try to, and practical, useful way to, as an exercise, to frame things differently. So thing can open itself up and reveal itself more for us. And the framing, the language of how we use our language and framing is also a super healthy component to mental health. Um, Maybe I'll read some of the what I'm gonna, yeah, have this book, for instance, that I'm trying to um, gather propositions that speaks to what I try to do in a very more coherent way, because it's a book and people are good or academic or people who have written this is knows what they're talking about, and they have analyzed and made this book. So it's not only my opinions that I'm leaning on when I'm trying to exemplify what I'm trying to talk about. Maybe here is a good, no, it's in Norwegian, so yeah. I think I'm done for now. But I'm really enjoying to look at different. This is also a good one. There are marked some passages that I'm gonna put into practice when I'm gonna present this at the point. Just different passages that speaks to what I try to speak to. Yeah, like this one. I'm gonna try to maybe I'll read this. This is a starting point for I think this will be maybe probably starting point for exploring at the probably in the future somewhere in the workshop context where it's good to have a solid arguments for what we're attempting to do and why we even should bother to try to do what I was trying to do. And I'm gonna try to translate it. To explore meaning phenomenologically means to attempt to get an experience like it shows itself in itself and restrain from adding to, oh my God, no, my translation at the go is not good enough. And I'm starting to I'm gonna stop there, and I'm curious if this made sense. Um, Feel free to comment, and um, if you were patient enough to listen to my exploration, I salute you, and I wish you a good tone, a high tone. Have a good day.